Coming
Yeah.
back to this whole agency pitch and the promise of MarTech and the ROI impact of MarTech to the customer, people are making decent sized investments here. They are faced with a bunch of choices. What's your lens on how should somebody, let's say, plan their MarTech evolution? Because what tends to happen a lot of times is they have these long feature checklists and they'll tick those 20 boxes, they eventually choose something. A year and a half later, they're only using 20% of all the boxes they've checked any which ways. So what's been your, let's say, impression of how people are choosing it the right way or the wrong way as far as their technology platform partners are concerned?
Uh, for me, like it's always been like, firstly, are you very simply able to articulate the problem that you have as a business? And if you're able to articulate that across departments. So MarTech is always, in my experience, a problem of overpaying and underusing. And a lot of businesses overpay for a lot of tools that are being used by multiple departments, but have
Mm-hmm.
overlap of information. um, Simple examples, right? Like if you look at customer engagement platforms like yourself, who are evolving into be a well stacked CDP, then
Right.
you have the traditional CDPs of the world. Like I've seen businesses who have customer engagement platforms, but they don't know they're using 20% of it, as you say. But they want to go out and get a CDP, which is even more expensive, right? And you
Hmm.
ask them why? Because we're going to get a single view of customer. What does that mean? You only have ecom. Like, what do you need? You don't have physical stores, you don't have like a kiosk, you don't have a digital, what single view of customers?
Sure.
And even after that, like, is that not available within the current scheme of things that you
Sure.
have, right? So those are the granularities which people don't go to while choosing a martech stack. They only
Mm-hmm.
look at like a fancy terminology, or they look at the problem statement that somebody else pitched them.
Right.
And I feel like if you get all the head of departments in a room and ask them like, what are you trying to solve for, what visibility you don't have, articulate that in two sentences, get five people to do the same thing, and then to see where the overlap comes in,
Hmm.
reduce the redundancies between them, and then start creating a MarTech stack.
Mm-hmm.
Then I feel it's the most beneficial because a lot of data is sitting, right? If you have a
Sure.
data team, you can actually pull the data and give the visualization to different teams in the way that they want. Right?
Hmm.
The only thing is the vision is not there, or just going to that level of granularity in your day to day and being honest about your problems. That's not there.
Which is also a certain level of legacy mindset problems, right? Because people come with a certain degree of familiarity with the status quo. Things that are working. You don't want to break them up. And then it's somebody's initiative, which you may or may not always be willing to champion and support. So we see a lot of that
Right.
happening, at least in the Indian market, where there are large organizations with multiple departments. And to just be able to drive change, it's a substantial amount of effort. And so, which is where I'm trying to now zoom in to say that, okay, if somebody is prepared to make this commitment, how do they do it right? What are the things that are pitfalls that they could definitely avoid? That don't do these three things because you will end up writing off that time and the effort you've spent, right? So, in your impression, if you've seen those three things that keep happening in the GCC region, and you might just say that, okay, this is what I've seen more in Dubai, this is what I've seen more in Saudi. What were those three things, three common mistakes that are being made?
Uh, I think from that perspective, in Saudi specifically, what we have seen is uh, there is a big lack of internal resource talent. What that leads to is they are looking at different tools only from the checkbox perspective, and they think the tool which gives me all of the checkboxes is the one which I'm going to go for. They
Hmm.
don't understand my main problem statement is these four checkboxes,
Sure.
right? For example, offline data integration, because Saudi is a retail heavy region, that's the number one core of the business
Sure.
because your first party data is sitting there. Which
Hmm.
tools is going to solve this problem for me and what do I need from my side, right? They don't think from that perspective. That's a number one problem statement. Number two problem statement is they like from an ROI calculation perspective, because end of the day, investment in MarTech is now being compared against the ROI that the platform will give you, right?
Sure.
They don't really do this fairly well, where retention, purchase frequency, moving customers from offline to online, all of this it is not easy, right? Like it's honestly not easy
Sure.
calculating that ROI. And the final thing I would say is like they don't think long term. They think of like you want to build an app and I want to send push notifications. So what platform will help me do that, right? Or
Hmm.
I want to personalize my communication across a few journeys. What platform will do that? MarTech, especially. the implementation effort, the maintenance efforts on such tools is very extensive. So
Hmm.
you have to have like 2 to 3 year window in mind of what you want to achieve out of this, rather than like a 6 month window, right? So I'm not really seeing like customers coming up with the roadmap of what they want to achieve out of tool or of a
Hmm.
usage of a tool over the next 2 3 years, right? It's a very short term mindset that they have.
Hmm. And what does that mean for you as a expert on the subject in the region, and who is available as an agency partner who could potentially even put skin in the game to say that so I'm going to charge you if a certain level of success metric is met, because the ROI question mark remains. And if you are able to promise a certain level of impact because you have a certain level of experience in that business, does that help matters? How do you win confidence? What is your pitch to customers when you try to sell to them? How do you price that? Okay, this is what I'm going to charge, and this is the kind of business I can deliver for you.
Great question. I think for us, like how we are positioning ourselves is we are trying to be a partner who can actually do the entire array of services. So if you want somebody as a client who's starting out, he needs help in just the basic CRM setup, then want to scale that. So we are a partner who can do that. In that relationship, the commercial is usually tied to the resource because there is no benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at like a mature business who's, let's say, having a similar level of CRM contribution for the last 2 3 years, and now their challenge is to increase that CRM contribution. They want to cut down their media spends.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, it becomes an ROI conversation where what are you guys bringing to the table, right? So
Yeah.
we have to establish firstly the measurement. How do we measure CRM? As some people look within the tool in a certain attribution window.
Yeah.
Some people do. Some people want UTMs
Hmm.
for the data to come into GA and deduplication of all of the CRM data and then measure the contribution through that. So
Yeah.
measurement is one of the main areas you want to align on with the client. Second is the kind of investments they are willing to do on certain channels within CRM. For example, I've seen a lot of businesses who are mature but are only using push and email as a channel. So you
Mm-hmm.
go to them like, what about your WhatsApp strategy? How often do you do SMS? How much are you spending there? Can we move that budget into WhatsApp? Right,
Right.
first question. Then, second question would be like, what's your in-app strategy? Do you have a recommendation engine? How much are you paying for that?
Sure.
Can the recommendation engine be linked to CRM?
Right.
So a simple use case, for example, would be you will go to a product page, you will see businesses in the e-com space suggesting recommended products, style it with, recently viewed, etc. on the PDP pages. But usually that product engine or recommendation engine is sitting with the product person in the
Yeah.
company who's managing that, right?
Sure.
What I did in my previous role is I took that and I started creating PLP pages within the app, which
Mm-hmm.
were powered through this recommendation engines. So
Okay.
simple example could be a bestseller page. Simple
Right.
example could be a recently viewed page.
Sure.
Similar products, cross sell. You can just go on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you link this to your CRM conversation. So when the customer is coming back, the first banner that they see in the app is pick up where they left from.
Yeah.
So
Pick up
it
where he
takes them
left.
to the
Hmm.
page left from.
Yeah.
Second could be if it's a cross sell campaign going on, your cross sell communication links to the cross sell page, which is now customized for
Hmm.
every single
Hmm.
customer,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So when these silos are kind of cut down, from at least I know from my perspective, there's a big uplift that can come in
Sure.
because the relevancy of everything improves. Like as soon as you implement this, right? So
Right.
coming back to your question, so in such situations, what we do is we take a bucket or a range where we say like if your CRM contribution is sitting at 15% flat for the last 2 years, and you're willing to open up WhatsApp as a channel, there are no like integration or major issues around that. Then if we go from 15 to 20, we'll charge you X. If we go from 20 to 25, we're going to charge you X plus Y and so on,
Sure.
right? So commercials are usually tied to that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Is a typical question on ROAS and ROI kind of addressed? Because people will attach, let's say, I would spend this much money on Google and I would get this much transactions out of it. I'm paying this much for the tool. I'm paying you guys this much. All of this is adding up. So I need to at least get this much dollar value or order value out of this. Is that a frequent ask? And if yes, what's the right benchmark?
I think that's where my client side experience really helps, because I know these are the questions which are going to come to me, right? If I was
Right.
the guy, I would ask the probably the same
Hmm.
questions.
Hmm.
So when we create our commercials, we usually show them the tooling expense, the agency expense, the revenue. We show them
Hmm.
all they would anyways ask for, so
Yeah.
that they know like you've thought through, right? And
Sure.
in that actually really helps in a lot of commercial conversations for us, because we start thinking like a client. What would the
Yeah.
client want, whether it's a performance pitch, whether it's a CRM pitch, right?
Hmm.
So the benchmark of that is usually like, on performance, usually agencies like, or even ourselves, we charge like a percentage of media, or like a fixed retainer, whichever is
Yeah.
high. On
Hmm.
the CRM space, it just comes down to honestly, a fixed fee plus a percentage, or sometimes it comes down to a fixed number, which in each range can go up by 30-40%. Right. So, for example, you can charge 15,000 dirham as a benchmark price per month, plus extra 5K if you deliver within certain range, extra 10K if you deliver within certain range, and so on.
So there is a bit of skin in the game with a degree of basic resource costing in place. So I was just curious that when you put
Correct.
this 15,000 dirham plus this, whatever that number is, how does the client see the ROI on this? Does he say 5x? Does he say 10x? Does it say 20x? Does it say 50x? What is he expecting, and what is the right number to chase? If I'm a client and if I'm going to report an agency, how should I benchmark? Okay, what is reasonable to expect out of this engagement?
Uh, that's an interesting one. So, usually, in my experience,
Hmm.
when you are allocating budgets, not more than 5 to 10% of your overall marketing expense should be tooling and agencies.
Sure.
That's a general benchmark that I've seen in my previous roles. So
Sure.
almost 50-60% is performance. Then there is, if you include influencers within performance, which is again becoming a norm, it goes up to 60-65%,
Sure.
60%. 20-25% should be like CRM, which includes cost of emails,
Hmm.
cost of WhatsApp, SMS, etc. Then there is a tooling fee, which
Sure.
is across MarTech, right? Across performance, across CRM, and so on.
Hmm.
So usually, like, it is between 10-15%. For bigger organizations, that can go up to 20-25% when the volume of MAUs, etc., go up.
Sure.
Now, if you take that 20% of the budget, and of that, the customer engagement platform is, let's say, 30% or 40% of that, you
Right.
take that costing and then you show the revenue against that. So in my
Hmm.
experience, it's usually between, one sec, doing some mental maths here. So I think it's has to be somewhere between 2x of your business ROI. So if you're operating at a 15 or a 10% cost of sale, which means you're doing a 10 ROAS. So your
Hmm.
the ROAS from your CRM channel should be somewhere close to 15 to 20 for it to make sense.
Which is a fair then expectation that okay, this is going to move your weighted average up, and this is what you should be prepared to invest. When you look at ROI as a math wala lens, the fact that this whole tooling cost is about 5% of your overall marketing budget, choosing a tool for a lower cost is a bad idea. You might just want to hold the product and the agency accountable for the ROI and the impact, because instead of 20%, if it's going to do instead of 20x, if it's going to do 12x, then you're probably and if you're paying 75% of the cost, then you're substantially worse off, right? So I'm just curious to understand if you see this pattern of choosing tools for price. I found a cheaper alternative, so I want to go for that as a pattern, which is potentially a mistake.
Um, I think it just comes down to the scale of business, right? Some businesses, they're not very like, if you're a startup and suddenly you look for a tool which is asking you based on MAU a certain range, which is substantial for you to pay for a tool. In that case, they expect, like, CRM. It takes time to build. First party data takes time to build. The purchase frequency takes time to kick in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, like, usually that's a very common thing that we hear from the startup founders, where they're like, I'm not sure if I should be investing this 20-30,000 dollars in this tool for the next year. I'm not sure if I have the tooling, if I have the
Mm-hmm.
resources, or the conviction that will generate me so much over the next year, right? So
Sure.
for bigger businesses, I did mention that the cost of the tooling can go up to 20-25%.
Right.
In that sense, then it kind of, the math adds up when you look at
Hmm.
25% delivering a 2x ROAS at the business. So
Hmm.
where like performance is more of an acquisition channel, it's always going to be expensive because I'm looking at upper funnel, fueling the
Yeah. Yeah.
retention consistently, right? So the
Hmm.
metrics change. You look at ROI from retention and you look CAC from a performance perspective.
Fair enough. So, in some sense, it's a function of business stage, and that would also mean that if you have a simpler version of the product available for half the cost, then you're okay there because you don't have the resources or the strategy plan to use the entire functionality anyway. So, if let's say WebEngage has 100 line items in offering, you might just want to start with 20 and pay less and get rolling with it, amplify the impact, see the ROI, and then expand your subscription as well, in some sense.
Exactly right. I think that's one area where actually I enjoy working with WebEngage a lot because
Hmm.
the team here and the general like the management of Leash has been really kind in giving us FaceTime and being on calls on a bi-weekly some of the bi-weekly calls. And we've usually had flexibility of working closely with the team and introducing startups where we know you guys will cater. And because you see the long term vision of like what that company's vision is, where are they back, where are they heading on to, right? So being a bit flexible on both ends
Sure.
is where I feel like it's a a value add for me to bring web engage into the conversations whenever a retention conversation comes up.
Sure, fair. So, coming back to life as a agency and your favorite stories from what you've seen happen in the customer ecosystem. What's your favorite story so far?
Uh, well, I told you one, right, where I spoke to the guy who, like I said, your website. I was hoping it'll be like a website pitch because the website looked horrible.
Sure.
But then he spoke about omnichannel and had like 800 stores. So it
Mm-hmm.
took me some time to understand like these guys are a serious business doing 500 million dirhams offline, but they don't know like what an engagement platform is.
Sure.
So it's just happened multiple times, same kind of scenarios.
So, what is the kind of, let's say, use cases slash stories you're able to take live with people like this? What kind of business impact are you able to show in, let's say, a 3 to 6 months time window, which creates an aha moment for these guys to say, "Oh, guys, I didn't know this was possible."
One example of a similar, not similar, but like a classic example would be where we started working with the client called Nice in Saudi, Nice Furnitures. They had onboarded the tool for close to 1.5 2 years. They're working with Web Engage, so it's even more relevant. When we took over, they were contributing about 2.53% CRM contribution,
Sure.
right? And for whatever reason, they were not able to use the tool. Pretty standard set of push notifications and emails were going out.
Mm-hmm.
And when we took over, the, just by implementing the basics, including more channels, making sure all the hygiene automation across the funnel is in place,
Hmm.
making sure more channels are part of each flow that's going out, and so on, and setting up some automated flows. The contribution went up in 3 months from 3% to like about 10-11%.
Wow.
And then as of last month, we are sitting at almost 25% business contribution because
Wow.
we started scaling it up more, right? So this is a very classic example. Funny you asked, but this is just becoming more and more of a norm, especially in the Saudi clients.
Which is very interesting to see that if you're making 25% of somebody's revenue puts you in a very important position in their life, in their circle of influence and circle of respect, right? Because then you're suddenly an important stakeholder of the conversation. That, guys, I need to achieve these KPIs in the next 3 quarters. These are the components that I would expect from you. So they will become more demanding. You'll have a greater, let's say, influence on their business outcomes. You might also be in a position to get them to throw that piece of furniture away, which is giving terrible NPS, because then the kind of mathematical impact this can create on that world, right? So going back further on, when these kind of results have to apply and you're scaling up your organization, you said the talent supply is still a question mark with respect to serving these markets locally. How are you building about your talent strategy on making sure that the 3% can go to 25% for a lot of more clients?
Um, for me, like the good thing is I'm my talent comes from the client side, which is not rare. Clients do
Sure.
have enough CRM experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, I'm able to look at mature businesses in the region and the vision that we have and the client base that we have and the team that we have built up. It helps us attract a lot more people. So one more person is joining us who's again coming from a client side role. So
Sure.
all of these things add up. And for me, like expansion is just finding the right people with the right attitude especially on the CRM side, like when you are able to put up 2, 3 people who come from clients and are
Hmm.
delivering results and have a case study or have a story to tell, then these people are like my pillars who can attract more people, right, from the
Hmm.
CRM front. So I'm trying to build that first strong fundamental infrastructure and layer of people who then become like a magnet, right? Then I'm able to like go into interviews and inspire them, tell them
Of
what are we
course.
trying to build. And here
Hmm.
is this person who's come and joined me from Noon, and here is this person who's come joined me from Landmark, right? So they're able to then correlate.
Fair enough. So initial set of talent then becomes a magnet for the next batch of talent, and then the practice just keeps getting stronger, which would, in some sense, mean the clients are also slightly more comfortable leaving those KPIs to you because your people know how this has to play out. They have enough first-hand experience outside of your company, plus whatever case studies now are building should inspire confidence as well. So in terms of the scale,
Exactly, right. And
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, go on.
no, I was just double clicking on that. This is exactly the thing that got me excited to move to sell through.
Right.
Because if somebody like me came and pitched me in the past and said, like, let me solve for your customer problem, let
Hmm.
me not solve for, like, your affiliate, your performance, let me solve for your customer problem. Right. So that'll be get me excited because then I know like I can trust the guy and I can have a conversation which is a little bit more broad. I can speak to the guy regarding my I need to acquire X amount of customers this year. So there's your performance team's target. But parallelly, these many of those people need to come back and purchase in a certain frequency. So is your retention team target. So in total, this is the budget you get. In total, this is the outcome that I want. And I can have that conversation with the guy at that level, usually which happens in-house. It doesn't happen with external agencies, right? And this
Hmm.
is exactly the kind of conversations we are having with the clients, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback where clients are saying we're enjoying our conversations. We go in presenting CRM, but we end up discussing like, you know, holistically your retention, your NPS, your this and
Right.
that, right? So that's exciting for us.
Very interesting time and journey. So, well, we wish you all the best with your expansion in Saudi and whichever geographies you're aiming for. We hope to remain meaningful partners in the journey as well. I think I'm covered for my part. Any closing remarks from your side, Ankit?
No, thank you for having me. I think doing this as an entrepreneur and trying to build something new is always a bit scary. So having
Yes.
a platform to speak about this, to put the word out there, I think yeah, it's like a great initiative. So I'm glad I was able to be part of this.
I hope you found the conversation interesting. This is going to be on my special list for every time I travel to ME and want to make sure that I remember the story of the market. We're trying to improve our podcast. In future, please share all of your suggestions and inputs on sormpodcast@webengage.com. Thank you so much.